Hello, 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 everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Facebook peeps, Zoom peeps, every peeps. We're so excited to be here and to be talking to really awesome people that are running for office right now, folks that are already in office, and people that are doing the damn thing in the community. So super pumped to be here. Want to do some housekeeping right before we get started. First and foremost, if you are in the Zoom room, please make sure that you are muted unless you are speaking, and you shouldn't be speaking unless you are one of our panelists. So please make sure that you keep those mics on mute. Really appreciate it. To our candidates, welcome, welcome, welcome. And to our organizers, welcome, welcome, welcome. I want to do a quick shout out to our Revolution for having us today and for hosting the People's Forum. We wish that we could be at 3 Links in Deep Ellum, but the Texas weather said hell no. So here we are on Zoom, but we're still excited to be here. I want to take a second to introduce our candidates. We have Chris Leal for HD 114. We have Councilman Jesse Moreno, Representative Jasmine Crockett running for Congress in Texas's 30th District, and our organizer Ramiro Luna here with Somos Tejas. So excited to have you. Want to let you know that we're going to get started with questions really quickly, but you should know that when you see this red envelope over here, that means that it's time for you to wrap it up. Okay, we only have about 5 minutes per question. So just letting you know, when you see this red envelope, you gotta stop talking. So before we get started, let me just introduce my amazing, wonderful, beautiful co-host, Maria, to take us through some updates before we get into it.
Hi all, very excited to be here, and thanks again to our panelists. And Sana, thank you for that great introduction. As we go in through the panel, we also want to remind everybody who's watching to definitely get involved with everything that's happening on the ground. Our Revolution North Texas will be having a block walk this weekend to support Chris and Jasmine, as well as in Tarrant County. So be sure to be following those social media pages for more updates. We'll also be having an election night watch party at 7:30 p.m. virtually. So people can sign up for this at rrev.us/North Texas, and we'll have all those respective links in the comments. And we look forward to reading some of those questions too, coming in from the audiences later on as we continue this panel. So I'll hand the mic back over to you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, if you are on Facebook, please feel free to comment your questions in the comments. And we'll be taking those questions to our folks here live in just a second. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to take a second to allow you guys to introduce yourselves. So my first question is going to go to Representative Crockett and Chris. We want to know a little bit about you. Who are you and why are you running? I want to start with Representative Crockett.
Hey, everyone. I hope you are all staying warm. That is what's most important right now. I am Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett. I currently represent House District 100. It is the seat that was vacated by the now mayor for the city of Dallas, Eric Johnson. And I am still holding my seat. I think there's been a little confusion about that. So I am still the state representative. I will be the state representative no matter what happens in the primary until January of next year. But I am currently running to become the next U.S. representative for Congressional District 30. And I'm really excited about it. I'm excited most about it because we saw that Texas really didn't want to listen to Texans. We saw people come spend countless hours as it relates to talking about the harms of the voter suppression bill that they were attempting to pass, yet it fell on deaf ears. We saw as people came and talked about the harm that potentially would become trans children, and it fell on deaf ears. We heard women come and talk about their reproductive rights and tell their stories, very personal stories, and it all fell on deaf ears. And so after redistricting, it became clear that Texas was only going to lock in their power for the next decade. And that's exactly what's happened with these maps. The maps were unfairly drawn on the congressional level, on the Senate level, as well as on the Texas House level. And that was all by design. And it also became clear that the only place that we could seek some kind of relief and hopefully push forward with progressive policies was going to be on the federal level. And so that's why I'm excited to have the opportunity after one session or I should say one term, because I went through a lot of sessions I went through a record number of sessions. But absolutely, after one term, to have an opportunity to go to the federal level so that we can get reproductive rights for all women, not just Texans, but throughout this entire country. Because what we saw is the dangerous rhetoric that starts in Texas, it spreads through this country like a cancer. And so now it's not just Texas, it's Florida, it's Georgia, it's Arkansas, it's Missouri. And so we've got to seek federal relief on voting rights, on repro rights, on climate justice issues. As we know, Texas has the most amount of wind farms than anywhere else, but we also have the biggest oil and gas industry. You know, everything's bigger in Texas, right? But I think we're in a unique situation to be in a state like Texas and talk about climate change. I think that gives us a unique perspective when we go in on the federal level to say, listen, we understand we've got people that have jobs in Texas. They rely on this. So we absolutely are committed to transitioning to a more clean environment and doing it in a very responsible way, because we've got people that actually work in the industry versus other states where they may not have oil and gas really as one of their huge economic drivers. So I'm excited to have an opportunity to talk to y'all, our revolution. Y'all have been with me on this journey. If it wasn't for y'all, probably wouldn't got those 90 votes to get me over the top in the first place to become a state representative. So I'm excited to be here and I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Crockett. Same question, who are you and why are you running? Chris.
Thank you, Asana. Thank you, Maria, as well, and the other panelists. Thank you to Our Revolution for having us here tonight. I do wish we could be here together in person. Even though we're not at 3 Links, I do have an alcoholic beverage here to try to, bring the vibes here at home. My name is Chris Leal. I'm running for House District 114, which is downtown Dallas and White Rock Lake and everything in between it. I am a Dallas native, a public school teacher. I teach a law and justice class to 7th and 8th graders here in Dallas, a lifelong progressive Democrat, and a proud Tejano. And look, the lighthearted answer I give when people ask me why I'm running is I say, have you seen the news lately? As Jasmine was talking about, there's we've had a lot going on in our state, especially the last year or so with all these special sessions that we've seen, assaults on reproductive rights, on our public school systems, on our voting rights, on everything, on working Texans. And so, look, I'm running because, one, as I just said, our public schools are under assault on all sides, on all sides. So, our curriculums are being attacked, as we've seen in the CRT hysteria and this book banning stuff. We have a nationwide teacher shortage. Meanwhile, Texas teachers get paid $10,000 less than the national average. The amount of money we're spending on our students is some of the lowest in the country, 43rd out of 50. We're attacking teacher retirements on top of it. So literally just everywhere you can look in the public education in our system. The state's been defunding the education budget for the last 10 years, just in outright budget cuts, but also in privatizations and charters and vouchers. And so, there's so much work to do. It really is in crisis, and we need people down in Austin who understand what's going on in our classrooms and all the work that we have to do on these issues, and who aren't going to budge. I also have a background in economics before I got into teaching, and I think that's very important. We need people down in Austin who understand that wages have been flat in our country for half a century, for 50 years, and what that does. It's not just a moral injustice, it's not just an economic injustice, but I think it's creating all this political insanity and extremism and Trumpism that we're seeing in the system today. And if we want to move away from it, we're going to have to fix these things to get back to a normal state of politics. And so, as Jasmine mentioned, there's a lot that needs to be done at the federal level to sort of supersede all these issues that we have going on. But we're still here in Texas. Still got work to do. We can't just give up on it. And redistricting sucked, but it's created some unique opportunities like we have here in House District 114. The district is a majority minority district. It's very diverse. It's very blue. It's, Dems get 70% of the vote. But even within that, it's very progressive. If you look at the Bernie and Warren vote last presidential primary, you got about half the primary votes. There is an appetite here for progressive Texas values. And that's what our campaign has been about. It's on all our, some people are still afraid to use that P word here in Texas, but it's on all of our yard signs. It's on all of our handouts. It's on the first thing you see when you go to our website. It's out there, and it's got a lot of work to do. It's not going to be a one session or one cycle thing. But I think we're approaching it a little differently. A lot of approach to progressivism in Texas lately has been driven from outside the state or following national trends. But Texas does have a progressive legacy here, and it's actually really rooted in economic issues and sort of the type of politics that we had that built the middle class the first time around in the middle of the last century. And so, there's a really Texan way of doing things here, and we're just going to have to be really bold and strong about how we talk about these issues, because the Republicans, unfortunately, have shown that you can move the needle on these issues. I think one of the examples, but there's many of the examples I give is permitless carry, right? HB 1927. That was something that they've been the extremist Republicans have been trying to pass for cycles, and the moderate Republicans were like, "This is crazy. You'll never do this." Well, guess what? Now it's the law of the land, and it's not enough. Now they're pushing to take it from 21 to 18, and from not just open carry, but to concealed carry as well. But they've shown that if we just, and Jasmine was a great example of this in her session, like, so what if we don't have the votes? So what if we don't have the votes? Introduce these bills, put these bills out there. It's an opportunity to start talking about these issues and to rally the people around it. Don't just talk about it into a vacuum. We're going to need these organizing groups, and we're going to need groups like Our Revolution to come out here and help us, push the conversation forward on all these policies. And obviously it's not going to get fixed in one session, but it's what we've got to do, and we're going to get it done over time.
Well, thank you both. I think there was a lot of the themes that we're going to be speaking a little bit about: redistricting, affordable housing, all of that great stuff. You mentioned a lot of local organizations, and we actually have Ramiro Luna here, co-founder of Somos, Tejas. So Ramiro, I'll pass the mic to you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work with Somos, Tejas.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be part of this panel. My name is Ramiro Luna. I am the executive director of Somos, Tejas. I am also a dreamer. I'm an advocate. I'm a community organizer, and I'm a political operative. I have done over 50 campaigns now, helped over 25 people of color and women get elected into office. All this while being denied the right to vote. And to be quite honest with you, I think that's what gives me the reason for what Somos Tejas is. Somos Tejas is a marriage of 18 years of organizing and campaigning experience into a passion project to really give voice to our community beyond the campaign. What I mean by that is that, as somebody who would love to have the chance to have a voice in our community, I understand that the people that don't always speak up is because they're not always listened to. So what I decided to do was to take all this experience and say, what would it be like if we ran a campaign without any candidate and never stop? And did the exact opposite of what a campaign did. And I say that by being a campaign manager, like a very successful campaign manager, and said, okay, as a successful campaign manager, we do what is supposed to be done to win an election. But a lot of times we dismiss the communities that really need the most attention. And that really is what hurt me the most, because whenever I looked at the areas that were skipped over, that was my hood. Like, that was like my family. That's where I came from. That's where we grew up at. That's where my board members, our volunteers, our staff came from. So I figured, let's just do the exact opposite and let's see what sticks. The first year, we were able to knock on around 6,000 doors without any funding. The second year, we were able to grassroots fundraise like around $16,000, and we knocked on 20,000 doors. This year, we're gonna knock on over 50,000 doors. And we now have staff. I have Carmen Ayala, who's our director of community outreach, and a young man, Evelyn Amaya, who's our deputy, who's been knocking on doors since day one for me, fresh out of high school, started knocking on doors as a volunteer. And he's been with me for like 3 years, maybe 5 campaigns now. So long story short, we're gonna do something revolutionary with the way that we organize campaigns, because we're not looking to making immediate, or right now what we see is that there's institutionalized and structural systems in which systematically we've been denied the right to have a voice, that to be listened to. So in that breath, the work that we're gonna be doing is gonna be deep. It's gonna take a long time for people to really understand the power that we're gonna grow into. But over time, people have seen our work change precincts. And I'll end with this. We've been alive for 2 years. The first 2 precincts that we focused on were in Oak Cliff, because that's where I'm from. South side of Oak Cliff is where I was raised. And so we started knocking on 75211, which is one of the zip codes that was the hardest hit by COVID. It's also the area that has been historically underperforming whenever we take an analysis of voter turnout. In the last local race, that precinct grew by over 220%. Imagine what would it be like if we expand that to West Dallas, Pleasant Grove, Oak Cliff, all the hoods that get overlooked. So Somos Tejas was born to do just that. So that's who we are.
Thank you so much for that. 220%. That is insane to think about. That's really incredible work. On that vein, I want to go to Councilmember Moreno. It has been almost a year, or about a year, since you got on council in District 2. I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about what inspired you to run to begin with, and what your first year on council has been like so far.
Well, I'm counting every day of it. It's been about 8 months. It's exhausting. I know Jasmine and Chris. I feel y'all. I know the struggle, but it's all well worth it. Ramiro, to your point, making sure that our residents who most need us have a voice, that we're able to get the resources to those neighborhoods that have been left out previously. That's why I ran, because I knew that I was the candidate to be able to bring resources to the communities that were underserved, and being able to have an impactful shaping of the district. And so I ran because I wanted to be able to continue doing the work that I had been doing as an advocate for my community. And I wanted to see someone to be there for the people of Dallas. And thank you all for putting this forum tonight. I wish we were in person in District 2 in Deep Ellum. I miss you all. I can't wait to be in the same room with you all.
Thank you so much, Councilmember.
And the first year, I mean, yeah, it's been a big adjustment. Timing is everything. It's been trying to get our office up and going. I have on our call Evelyn, who is an amazing liaison to our district. She used to be over at Jubilee Park, and so what we do on a day-to-day basis, I could not do without her. So I just want to thank her for being on the call right now and for supporting our team.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm going to pass it over to Maria for the next question.
Yes, thanks, y'all. So we're going to move into a topic that we hold very near and dear here in Texas, especially as more accessibility to it seems very stunted overall. So we'll move into healthcare. And Representative Crockett, this question is for you. Now more than ever, affordability for healthcare is top of mind for voters. Why do you believe we need Medicare for all? And what is your plan to be a champion for it in DC?
Yeah, so this is one of those really tough questions. Most people don't realize, just like the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, that was a bill that had been pending for 8 years before we finally got it out the House. Medicare for All was first proposed in 2003, and I still have not quite understood why it's failing to move. I think that this may come down to the sausage making, as they call it, because I don't really understand what the hindrances are. But Texas has over 5 million people right now that are uninsured. And that's a problem. It's beyond a problem, especially in the midst of a pandemic. We thought that we would at least expand upon Medicaid at the Texas House. We tried 2 different ways. We proposed a bill, that bill failed. And then we tried to do an amendment to the budget overall to be able to get that expanded access. And Texas refused to do that when we had, tens of thousands of people that were dying. And so, I plan to find out what the issues are, why this is not passing from the sausage making standpoint. But to be perfectly honest, we can't wait another 20 years. So there has to be some urgency that is applied right now, because if we're not going to expand access to healthcare in the middle of a pandemic, I honestly don't know when we will. So, there are some bills that I think that we probably can move really quickly. I've got to figure out kind of why they're not moving. One, Lloyd Doggett has proposed, which would allow at least, say, a county executor such as Clay Jenkins to go ahead and pull those expansion funds down. I don't know why that wouldn't be a bipartisan issue. The money is there. It's a matter of somebody basically reaching up and grabbing it. And then that at least would start to provide some sort of relief, provide for some additional coverage. Right now, we're losing hospitals, especially in rural Texas, because we literally don't have the healthcare funds flowing. And honestly, what people don't understand, and the Republicans do a very good job of trying to act like, this is the devil. The reality is that we're paying for this healthcare one way or another. We may as well do it in a very efficient way, because what's going on now is that you go to the emergency room and somebody who had a simple cold, who should have just gone to the doctor, but they don't have a doctor, they're in the emergency room. And now that person is having a heart attack for whatever reason, is having to deal with the fact that they're having to figure out the triage schedule, right? And so we are paying for it. When people walk in and they seek treatment for whatever it is, and they don't have any coverage, well, guess what? We all share the cost. Guess what insurance is? It's us all sharing the cost. We just need to do it in a lot more efficient way. And so I will be interested to sit down and have the conversations about why something as transformational as Medicare for All has been backlogged and been problematic for almost 20 years. And Texans, as far as I'm concerned, can't afford to wait another 20 years.
Thank you so much, Representative. And I think that's a really good segue as well to take it to Chris, because we know that in the state of Texas, just like Representative Crockett mentioned, we're constantly losing funding because we're not opting into Medicaid, right? So could you elaborate a little bit more on what your thoughts are on healthcare and what is your plan, whether it be to move towards a single payer system here in Texas, or what the best way to handle healthcare in Texas would be?
Yeah, so, first and foremost, right, the only long-term solution here is Medicare for all at the federal level, or a universal, single payer system at the federal level. You could do it at the state level too, but the way that insurance pools work, we're going to get the most bang for our buck having that pool as large as possible. It needs to cover the whole nation. Until, Jasmine can get up there and get DC's act together and get them to pass this thing. There's a lot we can do in Texas at the state level, and we have to, because Texas is dead last in healthcare coverage, 50 out of 50. Dallas itself has the second highest uninsured rate of any large city in the country. Okay. The number one cause of bankruptcy in the nation, right? Medical debt. Okay. It's stupid. It's insane. It's unproductive spending. As Jasmine mentioned, we sort of already pay. And as Bernie's mentioned, right? We already pay for Medicare for all. We just don't get it. And where's that waste going? It's going right to the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies. And we're talking about trillions of dollars. And so that's why those vested interests don't want, this very rational, insane system. But look, there's a lot we can do at the state level until then, right? The least of it is expanding Medicaid. This is something that, again, as Jasmine alluded to, look, our tax dollars are already paying, right? When we pay our federal taxes, this is going towards Medicaid spending, and we should just be bringing those dollars back. And oftentimes this healthcare stuff has support on both sides of the aisle. of voters, that is, of actual people. It's a different story when you get into the legislature. But people kind of, are coming around to this, and they understand that the economics of it, and this is how this works. And so we absolutely need to be expanding Medicaid in Texas. The current proposals are for adult coverage up to 138% of the federal poverty level. That's the bare minimum. But there are other parts of and things under the Medicaid umbrella that we can expand, programs that cover children, programs that cover pregnant women and recent mothers, that we can expand all those income eligibility requirements so that more and more people in Texas can get covered under Medicaid, even if they're not adults. There are cost-effective things that we should do. We should be moving to value-based payment systems, and we can step up. There are billions of dollars of provider fraud of, medical providers, milking the system in our state, and all of these drive up the cost of our Medicaid program. And so as we're trying to expand, basically we need to be expanding our state programs as much and as wide as possible until we have universal coverage at the federal system, at the federal level. We also need, kind of like how Obamacare put restrictions on private healthcare products, like minimum standards and coverage standards, and restrictions on profitability. We can do that at the state level as well if we want to. We need to let Planned Parenthood participate in Medicaid again, right? Because they are healthcare providers. I mean, there's a lot we can do at the state level, but eventually, we're going to need Medicare for all at the federal level.
Absolutely. Thank you both. And as we move on a little more granular lens into local politics, Jesse, this question goes to you. First of all, shout out East Dallas. Gotta give a shout out real quick. And this question is in more to redistricting. We know it's been a huge conversation recently. We saw a lot of the districts change. Sometimes I went to sleep and I woke up in a whole different district. But how do you see redistricting in Dallas playing out? And how do you think the new maps will impact Dallas moving forward?
Sure. If you don't mind, I just want to touch on healthcare real quickly, and just to let everyone know that we're doing our part here at the city level as well. We are doing an outpatient care facility for our unsheltered population. Too many times when they're leaving our healthcare county hospitals, they're basically left out in the street. So we want to make sure that we have those resources for that unsheltered population, but also working with the county and putting those healthcare clinics in the community so that our community doesn't have to go to the county hospital for a simple cold. They can go down to their local recreation center or local community center. As far as redistricting is concerned, the last public meeting ended. However, the Redistricting Commission is still meeting, and unfortunately, or fortunately for that matter, we as council members are not able to speak directly to our appointed commissioners who are actually drawing the maps. Right now, folks can still present their proposed maps. The only thing that I always want to advise people, if they are creating a map, that they have to be doing it for all 14 districts. You cannot just create one for District 2 or District 1 that will throw out that map. And so anyone can do a map that they like and would like to present to the redistricting committee. The goal is right now, we have 5 Latinos on the City of Dallas Council. I believe that number is going to grow potentially to 5 or 6 council districts in the minority Hispanic districts. It also looks like we'll be gaining District 10 to becoming an African-American council seat. And so that's really the extent that I have as far as redistricting, because we are not allowed to get involved at this point until the recommendation comes before council in a couple of months.
Thank you, Councilmember. I want to ask a similar question to you, Ramiro, when it comes to redistricting. I think I've definitely seen some videos out there, some social media posts out there about the way that folks have been engaging with the redistricting process on the city level. So can you talk to us a little bit about what Somos Tejas has been doing around redistricting, And why? Why should people care about redistricting on the city level? And you're muted.
And sorry, honestly, redistricting is something that we should care about at every single level. And you know, speaking specifically, you know, to the city, I wanted to first address, you know, even at the congressional level. Whenever we think about how much we grew as a state, 90% of the growth came by people of color. I don't know if that stat has been given yet. And whenever we think of that, and the fact that we still lack a Latino congressperson in North Texas, and we've never had one in the history of North Texas, to me, that's something for us to kind of like take a step back and say, wow, you know, I know there's a lot of opportunity, especially whenever we think about redistricting and where it was born from in regards to the census counts and the hard to count communities really probably weren't even fully counted. So it was, again, it's whenever we make that assessment of a systematic of how, you know, our representation at the state, federal, and local level doesn't always match us. We're lucky that at the city level, we have made significant strides. I mean, whenever we take comparison, Dallas and Tarrant County, you know, in Tarrant County, with less than one hand, you can count how many Latino elected officials are there. Yeah, congressional, city, every pretty much level. And I know whenever I speak, I'm very Latino centric, and that's mainly because, you know, I'm one of those people that I'd rather not mince words. And I'm, you know, whenever we speak of Black Lives Matter, I say that fully, you know, and loudly, because we need to put attention to that. Whenever we speak about representation, we also have to pay attention to the lack of representation in regards to even gender. You know, there's a lot less women being represented, although those are two different conversations, but still, I think for us, what we're trying to accomplish is at the local level, we want to make sure that at this moment in space, we're giving voice. We have one of our board members eloquently speak at the last city council meeting as to why we need to make sure that Oak Cliff no longer is beholden to the Kessler Park precinct. Imagine this. For the last 10 years, the most Latino precinct has been beholden to the affluential Kesslerite millionaire, who is now representing a Latino area that a lot of times the hoods that we live in, the areas that we represent, are looked over and are not given the same respect that we deserve. So for us, we're definitely gonna be, we started already making calls. Shout out to Juanita Arevalos in Pleasant Grove, who started making calls, taking a survey as to what people are thinking about Pleasant Grove, because there's also a push to take out a significant part of Pleasant Grove's and split that area out. And those are the things that we care about, making sure that the communities of color are the ones that are first brought to the you know, or brought to the table, because, you know, it's like, as that saying goes, like, you know, whenever, if you're not involved in that conversation, you're part of the menu, and in that, we are the conversation. Like, the conversation should begin and end with people of color, being completely honest. And unless we don't acknowledge that, then you know, and we don't work towards that, we're gonna continue to have the discrepancy, especially at the state and federal level, where we see legislators and congressmen that don't always, you know, or that should look more like us, and they haven't yet. So
100%. Thank you, Ramiro. And as we move into this next topic, it's actually one of the issues that I actually met Ramiro in, and that was in immigration. As an immigrant woman, this is kind of one of those topics that is very important. And I'll ask the question to Representative Crockett. Can you talk a little bit about your immigration platform and any plans to support incoming legislation that supports citizenship for all, or any legislation that you have in mind?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked me because seemingly our governor doesn't know his place. I just had to get that out there. I had to be petty for a moment because this is a federal issue. And it's interesting that I don't think that this is a Democratic or a Republican problem. I think Democrats and Republicans both have kind of like messed it up for a number of years. So sitting on the current committee that I'm on, one of my committees, criminal jurisprudence, we had an opportunity to actually go through what was going on with quote unquote Operation Lone Star. And it was absolutely ridiculous to find out that there were officers that were working at the border. They were basically entrapping people. And basically, you know, I mean, there was a story about, I want to say about 12 persons that were actually trying to present themselves for asylum. And we had officers that actually linked them up together, said, yes, come with me. And then they took them onto someone's land who had signed these little pieces of paper that they get the landowners to sign, saying that if anybody is on my land, you can arrest them for trespass. And that's exactly what they did. We actually heard from the district attorney himself who said, I had to dismiss these cases. Like this was complete entrapment and it was ridiculous. So number one, I want to talk about the law. The law itself right now says that someone can present themselves, say for asylum, anywhere. And this idea that you've got to go to a specific checkpoint or you got to be a specific person or anything like that, that's not what it is. And we need to make sure that our states are actually following the law instead of doing what we've seen them do here in the state of Texas. That's number one. Number two, one of the things that I think is absolutely ridiculous is our dreamers. We've got to protect them. You can't say that people who have come here, usually very, very young, and they didn't have any control over whether or not they were going to be here. And it's the only home that they've ever known. And then say that they have every right, but not really, right? Like they say, yes, you've got all the rights, but not really. We've got to protect our dreamers. We're talking about kiddos here. I mean, I don't know why we continue to have some issues as relates to children and taking care of them, but we've got to do that. In addition to that, we obviously have seen the issues with putting children into cages and this idea of separating families at the border. That is also problematic. We need to make sure we don't do that. But in addition to that, one of the most interesting things that I've talked to somebody about as it relates to immigration reform is the fact that we used to have a more open flow within the border where people that say wanted to come over and maybe work in certain jobs for a certain season, they could come over, but they had IDs. And so we knew exactly who they were and that kind of thing. And it really made for what I would consider to be a less kind of anxiousness at the border that I see now, where everyone seemingly is being characterized as a murderer or a cartel member or something like that. People were seen as being like people instead of, part of something a little bit more nefarious. So I think we need to reevaluate some of the old policies that we had that actually did work as it relates to kind of how people move across our border. And this isn't about, giving cartels free reign. We all want to make sure that the bad guys stay out. That's a universal thing, no matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, or an independent. But those people that are simply seeking the American dream that allegedly we're offering to everyone as a melting pot of a country, they should be afforded an opportunity to have that American dream. And right now, I don't think that America is living up to its promise.
Thank you, Representative Crockett. We want to use that similar question for you, Chris. We know that, we talk about immigration relief as a national issue, but want to hear your thoughts about what your platform when it comes to immigration is on the state level.
Yeah, so, there's some analogy here to healthcare where ultimately we need federal action, right? We hear that all the time. It's a federal issue, and that's true. But just like with healthcare, there's a lot we can do at the state level. Some of the things Jasmine already hit on, things like Operation Lone Star, Governor Abbott spending our money at the border to build federal infrastructure and to separate families. That's got to stop. We've got to immediately stop that. And we should instead divert those funds to, bringing these families back together and compensating victims. We need to repeal, this goes back for a while, right? 2017's SB4, the Show Me Your Papers law. That needs to go. You know, we need to repeal these things at the state level. You know, every Texan needs an ID. This is a talking point that we have. We need identification. It's try to live your life without ID. I mean, you need it for everything, whether you're buying things or opening bank accounts or, you know, getting certain forms of healthcare. You need IDs. And so, you know, there's a lot of groups that have done great work on this. There's a couple of ways we can approach the ID thing. We can just repeal certain laws already on the books that say you have to check, you know, immigration status when issuing a state issued ID, or we can, instead of offering driver's licenses, we can offer driver's permits, you know, that as a workaround, or like some other groups have talked about, we can do this at the municipal level. Like there, you know, there's a push. They've already done this in Houston, or they passed it in Houston and they're doing it in San Antonio. Or, you know, we could have like libraries or something, or county-wide or municipal entities give, you know, ID cards that act as legal forms of identification. So we've absolutely got to have that. There's a lot we have to do there, you know, but fundamentally we need to change the narrative. I mean, we should consider ourselves lucky to have people that want to immigrate to this country and contribute to our society and contribute to our culture and contribute to our economy. Because this is a win-win in terms of the economy too. You look at certain countries like Japan, for example, where they're very, 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 very strict on immigration. What happens with all countries, the wealthier you get and the longer you're around, is birth rates decline and your population gets older. And the way we pay for all these things, retirement, Social Security, healthcare, it's all based on young people working in the economy. And that's really been a good economic benefit for us. It keeps our population young, having people that want to come to this country and contribute. And so, we need to have a humane immigration system and dignified immigration system so that people can go through the legal process. And we have to understand that this is good for our country and we need to go about it, you know, in the most efficient way possible.
Thank you. And you spoke a little bit about that localization of identification. I think that's one of the biggest ways that we can start closing in on the deportation pipeline that we see oftentimes with local cities that have partnerships with ICE. And Councilman Moreno, how can Dallas become a better city for all people, right? So what are some of those plans to better serve and protect those undocumented individuals that live here?
Right. So, first and foremost, it's human rights, basic human rights that all our residents deserve. We do have a great welcoming cities division within City Hall. We mentioned the municipal ID card. That's actually something that I'm working with along with some of my colleagues. And we expect that to come to committee here in May. So just a couple months so that all our residents have an opportunity to have a municipal enhanced library card here in the city of Dallas. And so we're continuing to work with that. One of my initiatives here is also to create a day labor center. We have a lot of residents who are taking advantage of making sure that we are giving protection rights for everyone who's seeking work here in the city of Dallas. And so those are the two big initiatives that we're doing, a day labor center and enhanced library cards.
Thank you so much, Councilman. And we're bringing it right back to you, Ramiro. We want to hear a little bit about, how your work with Somos Tejas has organized around this issue. And more specifically, how do you see, like, as someone who works in the community and who is always in community, where the disconnect is between folks who are doing this work on the ground and politicians or folks that are trying to get elected? What would your advice be?
Yeah. So, speaking as a dreamer, speaking as somebody who still hasn't been given the right to vote, speaking as somebody whose freedom is quite honestly fabricated in the sense that it's only 2 years long before you have to renew. And it's, it's a very fickle thing dependent on the president and what happens. Right now, we're fortunate, and I say that, in regards to comparative to Biden, but the work has to come at every single state. I mean, compared to come. But the work has to come at every single stage. I think just as Chris mentioned, in regards to, perfect case scenario, right now that we have the Senate and the House, this would be ideal for a strong, or at least for them to take care of dreamers like myself. 30 years denied the right to cast a vote. 30 years denied the right to have a voice and to be able to serve on boards. I was very fortunate that thanks to the campaign manager, Jasmine led an initiative, Strong Inclusive Cities, to try to get a proposal for the city. This is how shitty things are. They will not allow immigrants to have a voice on boards and commissions at every level. Like, we're not even able to even speak on things and issues that we care about, areas that we live in. And is those things that, in a sense, propelled me to do the work that I'm doing. Along the way, I was able to meet amazing leaders like Maria Yolisma. Like, whenever time I see her and I see, her shining, and I'm like, man, it was because of the struggle and finding the beauty on finding support through organizing. And I think that's really at the heart of the work that we're doing. I had mentioned earlier, a young man, Evelyn Amaya, who's our deputy field director. He's also a dreamer. And for us to be able to pay our people, the same ways that white men get paid, and my goal is eventually our nonprofit is going to be able to pay older Spanish language first speaker women the same pay that an entry-level white man will get paid to be a political organizer. And so, long story short, what we're trying to do is redefine how we see Latinos, see immigrants, and at the heart of it, that's even the name of who we are, Somos Tejas. Because a lot of times we're treated as the other, the outlier. But in our name in and of itself, it's like, nah, we are Tejas before Texas was Texas. Like, we are here, we're the origin story. Like, if it was Marvel Comics, this is like before, the new generation came out. So long story short, what I'm trying to get to is that the work that we're doing day-to-day embodies who we are as a culture. We're having an event this Friday called Pachanga at the Polls, where we're giving out tamales, champurrado, pan dulce, for anyone anybody that comes out to vote will get, whether they vote or not, they're gonna get some good food, And at the same time, we're gonna be giving out vaccines with some gift cards. So again, it's just bringing our cultura at the very forefront and saying like, hey, we're not going to whitewash ourselves into being something different than we are. We're going to showcase who we are as individuals and highlight our people in a space that we take ownership of our space. And so that's really kind of like where our organization kind of like gave birth. We are civic engagement and cultura is really, whenever you look at Somos Tejas, it's cultura and conciencia. It's just, shifting our consciousness and focusing on civic participation and putting our culture first. And I think if we do that, we're able to showcase ourselves as, whether we're dreamers, whether we're Latino, whether we're people of color, but just making sure that we're highlighting that with pride.
Thank you so much for that answer. All right, we're coming up on our last set of questions. So this question is going to be for Councilmember Moreno and for Ramiro. I care about two things very, very deeply, and that is housing and transit. So I'm going to grill you guys a little bit on that. So Councilmember Moreno, we're coming in now on what could be described as an affordable housing crisis in Dallas. So I'm really interested in what you think City Council and the Mayor's office should be doing to address that.
Yeah, so, workforce housing is something that's very important for me, making sure that our senior citizens get to stay in their homes as long as they wish to, that we build generational wealth, that we have workforce housing. And the way we do that is by zoning, by being more creative with our Like Tech credits, with our TIF grants that we award, making sure those are in high opportunity zones, making sure people have safe and affordable housing, right? And we have to expect more from our developers. If we're giving them zoning and if we're going to upzone, we have to almost demand that they bring additional affordable housing into high opportunity areas. And next is making sure that we're stabilizing neighborhoods. We see this all over Dallas, gentrification happening, where you have shotgun homes, or you have 1,000 square foot homes, and next to it you have these McMansions going up. So what we can do is put zoning measures in place that talk about how high a house can be, how much land coverage that house can cover. And so those are some of the ways that we can ensure that, we talk all day long about bringing affordable homes into the market. But what we also have to do, and what we can't forget, is we have to protect the affordable housing that we have in place today. And that means protecting the neighborhoods that bring the rich cultural diversiveness to the city of Dallas. If not, Dallas is going to look like all our suburbs, right? And so we do it through zoning and through our TIF credits.
Thank you. We love throwing shade on our Dallas suburbs. Just kidding. Ramiro, similar question. And to you, I want to know, how should local organizations and community organizers be responding to the housing crisis in Dallas? And what does affordability even mean to our communities that need it the most?
Thank you so much for that question. And actually, we're really proud of the organization that we're building together, because it has been very organic in the sense that it was really designed to do civic engagement and cultura as kind of like our two pillars. And through the last year, we added a third pillar, which was neighborhood associations. And neighborhood associations, that pillar was designed to demystify the concept of, sometimes a lot of homeowners associations scare off our, traditional Latino community to participate. So it's like, let's not do that. Let's just make sure that we fortify the neighborhood associations. So in the last year, we've already started working with 6 different neighborhood associations in West Dallas, Pleasant Grove, East Dallas, and Oak Cliff. In our website, you can check out like our neighborhood association tab, and it shows we've already even worked out with 2 different collaboratives, the West Oak Cliff Coalition and the Singleton Unidos Coalition, to help give voice to our homeowners. As somebody who's a dreamer, I was able to buy my house or to purchase a house 2 years ago. It's a dream come true in Oak Cliff. That has always, like somebody that was raised in Oak Cliff, a lot of, Oak Cliff pride, just like anybody who was raised in PG, just like anybody that was raised in East Dallas, like anybody that's raised in the hood, we know like what community is about. And we have to save that, because the city would not be the same without those cultural elements that give us that flavor. Like if anybody were to say, okay, who are we? We're the seasoning of the city, and we got to make sure that those hubs and those areas that are there. We've worked with different organizations like Rayo to inform the community of their rights and make sure that we are at the helm, like that we are the table, like that they understand that anybody around us, we're actually giving them space there. And a lot of times, I think that's the biggest discrepancy, that people come in and they're ready to say, hey, well, do you know that there's music playing? I'm like, yeah, it was playing 10 years ago, bro. Like you gotta like either get with it or like you came here for a reason, So long story short, our job, Alvaro Mata has been helping lead our neighborhood association effort. Check out our link. Like I said, just being completely, frank, the work that we do is a passion project. A lot of times, the biggest thing that we lack is resources, all volunteer-led for the most part. It wasn't until just literally 4 months ago that we were able to hire staff and that we were able. it wasn't until like 4 or 5 months ago that I actually was able to receive a check through my nonprofit. And regardless of wherever we go, we know that we're going to continue to do the work based on the people that come in. So kind of get in where you fit in and check out the work that we're doing, because we're doing a lot of fresh stuff. We just, like I said, just the last like little push that I'm gonna do for the event. We're doing an event this Saturday. Friday's the last day of early voting. We're doing a pachanga at the polls. Dallas Mavericks just gave us some free swag to hand out. We're giving out Concilio is giving out vaccines and giveaways for anybody that gets vaccinated. It's a pop-up, so come out, because what we want to do is do something very innovative. All of our volunteers, staff, and leaders, they all come from the people that we're representing. So it's all like coming from the heart, coming from passion, just putting bright minds together to do something fresh for the community.
My first red card today. Congratulations. Okay, Maria, take it away.
No, thank you. I think in that vein, it's super important to get involved, as we've heard from everybody on our panel. And all those respective links to those organizations and campaigns will be in the comments below. As we are coming to our close with our questions, we just want to invite our audience to continue making those questions in the comment sections as well. This question goes to both Representative Crockett and Chris. I think this is a really interesting play here. So this past year saw an alarming amount of damaging pieces of legislation come from the State House. What are some of those that are really concerning to you, and how can you fix it? So for Chris, it would be on the state level, for Representative Crockett on the federal end. So Chris, if you want to take it.
Sure. So look, in the short term, the next session, probably not going to have a majority. That doesn't mean that we should just, I believe we should still just continue forward and introduce all the bills that we would want to pass, even if we had the numbers. And that includes repealing a lot of the legislation that they passed last time, especially in the classroom. I teach middle school law and justice class. It's just social studies elective. So like HB 3979 and these like the CRT hysteria stuff. We need to end this censorship. We're not going to be rewriting our history. And so we need to just introduce the legislation. And if it fails, it fails. And it will use that as a starting point to, again, as a conversation, and we'll hold those accountable. And we should try to get people on the record of opposing these things. And, sort of like using a bully pulpit, right? That they talk about at the presidential level. We can do that if we include these groups that are organizing on the ground and reach out to the people and put legislation forward and frame things in the right way. And so, even if we don't have the numbers, we should really be pushing for that. And so there's a lot, right? There was sort of, as a candidate, everyone's like, well, what's your top priority or your top three? And, I have answers for those, but at the same time, as we saw last year, they attacked everything all at once, everything, voting rights, reproductive rights, education, infrastructure, working Texans, everything all at once. And so we need to be defending it all at once. We don't have any other choice. We've got to do it all at once, and we got to start somewhere. And I don't think our strategy should change much, knowing that we're not going to have the numbers to pass these things in the House. And really quickly on the last question, because I was hoping that Jasmine and I would get it. You guys asked Jesse and Ramiro on affordable housing. We have a whole platform on this. There's so much we can do on housing at the state level. We need property tax circuit breakers. These are things that other states have had in place for decades, which say, hey, if you're a working person with X level of income, you're never going to have to pay more than, put a number on it, 4 or 5% of your income in property taxes. And now that wouldn't be, I would envision that not being implemented at the state level. That would just be a tool that we empower our local governments and our municipal leaders to use and say, okay, this zip code needs these circuit breakers in place, or this zip code needs these circuit breakers in place. So no one should be priced out of their homes. I want to see community land trusts. And for those that don't know, this is basically separating home ownership from the value of the land underneath it. And we should be encouraging that. Places like Houston already have these things in place, and municipal land banks and stuff. And we should be encouraging that at the state level. And also, last but not least, we need tenants and renters' rights. We need to empower our tenants and our renters to have actual rights, because our landlords are running roughshod over them. Things like sources of income, for cause, and right to cure protections. We need certain things that say, hey, you're not going to just kick people out. And by the way, back to bringing it back to the question, things that we would repeal, things like HB 1925. We can't criminalize homelessness. It's just not going to work. So we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, so Chris, there were a lot of bills, but let me tell you something. One of the bills that I worked the hardest on out of all the bills was no-knock warrants. And so I think that there are opportunities in some of the most unlikely or some of the legislation that we think is most unlikely to pass. We were able to make this a priority item for the speaker. We were able to bring Gun Owners of America together with Black Lives Matter. And, it only died because, well, voting rights was before it on the calendar, and everybody turned to me and said, hey. And I said, they watered the bill down when it went to the Senate anyway. And if we don't have democracy, we don't have anything else. So kill the bill. So I think that there are some bills. I think that there hopefully would be some movement on a bill that I filed in the midst of the winter storm. If we can really organize around it, it's not one of those bills that I was able to really galvanize and organize around. But this bill would actually give a tax incentive, a property tax incentive to those homeowners that decide that they want to put solar panels on their homes, which accomplishes a couple of things. Basically, it's microgrids. And so what we do is we end up in a situation where you don't have as many people that are pulling off our grid that obviously can't support the demand that is being put on it, especially when we end up with these abnormal cold temperatures that end up traveling throughout the state. Right now, they're basically playing Russian roulette, hoping that we won't have a freeze that ends up coming over the entire state. But also not acknowledging the fact that our infrastructure has not been built out anymore, even though we are the fastest growing state in this country. And so we've got a lot of issues. But that's one of those issues that kind of hits on two things. It helps out those that are really feeling like property taxes are really high, but they're also very nervous about our energy grid. And so this provides energy instead of actually pulling energy off the grid. So that's a bill that hopefully we can at least start a really robust conversation about on the state level. As it relates to the federal level, I think we've got to hit on the biggies, right? We've got to start talking about climate change. Like yesterday, we just have to. And so I think that, we should be able to even bring in some of those that are really have consistently been naysayers around things like climate change and climate justice issues, because you have seen what happened in Texas, right? And so I think that it's the best example of why we need something to happen right now. I also obviously I plan to continue pushing forward as relates to voting rights, because as I stated before, if we don't have voting rights, we don't have anything else. And that includes redistricting. They basically go hand in hand. As has already been stated, 95% of the growth in the state of Texas was due to people of color. Yet even though 95% of the growth and almost half of that, 2 million new brown folk were accounted for in the state of Texas over the last decade, we only had 180,000 new Anglos compared to 2 million new brown people. And guess who got the 2 new congressional seats when we were able to get 2 new seats because of our growth? Well, I can tell you it wasn't Black, it wasn't brown, and it wasn't Asian. I'm just gonna leave it there. So you do the math. And so we really have to push forward with this legislation, because if we don't have voices to represent us, then that's where we miss out on these critical conversations about what it is to make sure that we've got equity amongst people of color, whether that's in housing, whether that's in criminal justice, whether that's in education. We miss out on that diverse perspective. We miss out on real representation as relates to the issues that are currently plaguing so many communities of color. And so, I feel like I've got a ton to deal with. Obviously, we've got to deal with healthcare. And, we needed something like yesterday. And so we've got to figure out what can we get done ASAP, not just kind of push for, but what can we get done ASAP, because it's hurting Texans more than it's hurting anyone else. And as it's already been stated by Chris, when we look at North Texas, it is specifically hurting people in my district more than it's hurting anyone else. The fact that we have a lack of access to healthcare, affordable healthcare. And so we've got to come up with, what can we do? What can we figure out legislatively and otherwise? I think that one of the big issues that I've really been trying to make sure that people understand is that I have the legislative chops necessary to actually write laws as someone who has practiced law for the last 16 years in multiple states, as well as on the federal level. The legislative side of this, I can handle. I can write bills. The part of this that I think really matters is in a district like District 30, is that you have to have someone who is a public servant. So when legislation fails, because say you're in the minority or because people want to start culture wars, you've got to be able to use literally your bully pulpit as the congresswoman to say, hey, Mr. Corporate such and such, I'm gonna need you to partner up because we need this help. One of the things that was just brought up is the Mavs are helping out. They're helping out Somos, and that's amazing. That's what we've got to start demanding and expecting of not only our actual residents, but our corporate residents to take ownership over our districts and to say that we're in this together, to say that our fates are tied together. And that's something that I started doing in HD 100. It's something that I look forward to doing on the congressional level. I have already started some of those conversations. And then I've got wonderful friends like Jesse Moreno on the city level and so many others, so that Jesse can say, hey, Jazz, we need some help. We need XYZ. He has the line of communication available with me. And I think when we work together, no matter what level you're on, whether you're on the state level, the county level, the city level, or the federal level, that's when we really see the next level of progress. And that's something I'm absolutely committed to doing as well. It's just making sure that I stay grounded, making sure that I know what's needed, not only with those electeds, but as those organizers and those of you that are members of our revolution. You guys were with me in the State House, along with Texas Organizing Project, along with Working Families Party, and so many more. This is how we make sure that the policies that will best affect people in a positive way, that those are the policies that we forge forward with. And that's what I plan to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And as we move into our audience comment or questions, this is kind of echoing back to a sentiment that you were speaking about earlier, Chris. So what can be done to lower homeowners' property taxes? And I think you spoke a little bit to it, but this is a question coming from Sarah.
Yeah, so one of my favorite things that we can do to help property taxpayers is to fully fund our education system. And it might not be very apparent how these things connect, but the state historically pays about half of the education budget, about 50%, and then the rest is shared with the local governments. Over the last 10 years, the state has been dialing that back. They got down to like 37, 38% of the education budget. What that means is, yeah, that does mean that there's some overall decline in the money going to schools, but most of it means that usually it means that the local governments have to make up the difference, your municipal governments. And where do they get that funding? Is from your property taxes. And so just getting education finance right and taking our state share of the education funding back to at least 50% can make sure that we're supporting our educators, supporting our students, taking a load off of our local governments, and therefore in return, they're not so reliant on the property taxes to pay for these things. And so, that's one of the first things we could do. Another thing is that, there are lots of loopholes that we have in place for, not surprisingly, commercial landowners and commercial property taxpayers. When you pay your property taxes, if you're a homeowner, the value of your home is pretty well known. You can look on Zillow, and the state has a pretty good database of, or like access to the value of your home. For commercial properties, that's not the case. A value, was it the Crescent recently sold for, almost $800 million, like $775 million. On the tax books, it was there for like 300 or 400 something $million. Okay, so simple. Let's just say, hey, when you buy a new commercial property, you have to disclose that price somewhere. And then that's what you're paying your taxes on. So there's a lot we can do there, and it's pretty simple to address. We just need people that are willing to do it.
Thank you, Chris. And last question of the night before we let you guys close off. Can you address safety in and around our schools? Not just during school hours, but safety for our kids during class time. Safety needs to be addressed. This question is from Lisa. And let's get Councilmember Moreno, since you work kind of very locally.
Absolutely. So right now we're actually having some concerns, some issues Woodrow Wilson High School over at Randall Park, now known as Willis Winters Park. And so it takes collaboration. And so actually tonight, I was going to be meeting with the principal if this was happening. Fortunately, that meeting got canceled. So I will still be able to meet with the ISD. And it might look, looking at the ISD police, do we really need police officers inside our schools, or do we need counselors? Do we need additional resources inside our classrooms? And so it's really, it's buy-in and working with our communities, because we do have a lot of issues with fights in some of our schools in District 2. And so that's top of mind for me right now, and making sure that we have a safe campus, a safe environment, safe parks that are across the street from these campuses. And so that's actually something that's ongoing right now. And we're looking to, for feedback and trying to curb those after school fights that are happening right now. And if you'll allow me, I do want to answer one question from earlier, was the transit by Hosanna. And I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to provide free fares for our DART riderships. We have to continue working on our mixed use transit ordinated projects on DART properties. Today, we passed a 700 surface parking lot that's going to become housing. And so that's the good model. I was not happy with the affordability rate that was in there at only 80% AMI, at only 20%. But we're making strides, and we just got to keep letting developers know that y'all have to pay your fair share as well. When we're talking about the disclosing of property taxes, if our commercial properties are paying their share, that means that the burden on our residents is going to be lower, but we're still going to be able to provide the same resources on a city level. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, and thank you for circling back to transit too. It's like you knew what I needed. All right, so we're gonna give everyone just 1 minute. 1 minute. Respect the red card. 1 minute to close off. Thank you so much for being here. I'm gonna give you all 1 minute. Let's start off with Ramiro. You're muted.
Come out Fridays, the last day of early voting from 5 to 7. We're having party at the polls in Oak Cliff, the Martin Weiss Library, and also just check us out, Somos Tejas, SOMOS, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, we're everywhere. So follow us. If you have a time, volunteer. If you have some extra cash, donate. We're doing this straight grassroots. It's a passion project, and people like y'all can help us continue to do the great work that we're doing.
A record 18 seconds. We love to see it. All right, Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you, guys. Y'all are amazing. Thank y'all for all the work that y'all do on a daily basis. Our revolution, Somos Tejas. All our information from my office is in the chat. Please reach out. Look, we all have the same goals. We all have the same visions. Too many times we're working in silos, and we just need to collaborate. We need to come together. I've seen so many projects where we're working on the same issue, but we're fighting against each other because we're not uniting. And so my only ask is that we come together more, and that we share our visions, and that we work together for the betterment of our residents here at the city level, at the county level, and the state, and the federal level as well. And so thank you all again for the opportunity. Look forward to continuing working with y'all.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Crockett.
Absolutely. I really want to take this time to applaud everyone that's on this panel, especially our moderators, because let me tell you something. Working families don't have the benefit of sitting in front of a TV, CNN, MSNBC, and reading all the papers 24/7. They're too busy trying to make sure that they can literally keep the lights on, to make sure that they actually have a roof to have over their head. But the hard work of our revolution and so many Somos, Tejas, you've heard so many wonderful things that they're doing, as well as elected leaders. We are public servants. I know that our councilman could probably make a lot more money doing something else, but he's working in this capacity because he believes in a better Dallas. And that's what he's working for. And so I want you to take your time to research all these organizations, to research all these candidates and support them. This is how we keep it going. This is how people powered, people get the power, right? It's through organizations and through people that we see that are elected to do the work and are willing to do the work and do it for you and not for anybody else. So thank you so much. I love you, our revolution. And I'll see y'all on Tuesday. That's Victory Day, baby.
You know what? She went 7 seconds over, but I'm gonna let it slide this time because that was pretty cool. All right. And last but not least, my fellow econ major, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you, Hosanna. Thank you, Maria, for moderating this. Thank you to our revolution. It does amazing work. And I'm so grateful to be up here with people like Jesse Moreno and Jasmine Crockett and Ramiro Luna. Yeah, look, we've got a big election day coming up. All right. I'm not the only one, but I'm in a very crowded primary. I'm the middle school teacher in a field of lawyers and political consultants, and those are fine professions. But, we need someone down in the legislature who understands what's going on in our classrooms. We need someone with a background in economics like Hosanna and I that understands these issues facing our state and aren't afraid to take risks and put their values on the line to fight for these things, because we have so much work to do. And so come out to the polls, y'all. Turnout's been kind of quiet. We've been at the polls waiting for you. So I'm excited to see you guys all on Tuesday. And thanks again for having me here tonight.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm gonna pass it over to my better half, Maria.
Thanks, Hosanna. Thank you guys so much again for making the time. Thank you to everybody who tuned in, and importantly, those who voiced in your questions. And just as a reminder, a lot of the work that is being done on the ground by our Revolution North Texas, as well as Somos Tejas and so many countless other organizations in North Texas, be sure to get involved in any capacity that you can. Maybe you have some time to spare to go block walking this weekend with our Revolution North Texas, or maybe you have some time to spare on Friday. There's always a way to get involved and get connected. Lastly, let's see, and as Representative Crockett mentioned, there is a victory watch party on Tuesday, so be sure to check that out as well. Our respective links can be found in the comments below. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much. Sorry, candidates, y'all are amazing. And good luck on election day.
Best